What's up YouTube, this is Fate, bringing you another deck profile, and today I've got a very unique take on my Dragunity builds today, and I'm about to show you Dragunity Burning Abyss, or as I like to call Burning Abyss Dragunities, or the B.A.D deck. And considering how it's named, this build isn't actually that bad. But a little bit of inspiration on the testing for this build comes from the Phalanx structure deck coming out soon. And I figured until that deck gets here, I wanted to test out something else that definitely plays with a lot of effects once monsters go to the graveyard. And Burning Abyss is one of those builds out there that are most prone to graveyard effects whenever they're sent to the grave, period. So I figured I'd test a little bit with that, with the discarded consistency with the Dragunity variant with their field card Dragon Ravine, and I gotta say, this build is a pretty unique combination that packs a 1-2 punch that your opponent does not see coming. And without further ado, let's get to the deck profile. And as usual with my Dragunity decks, I keep the ratio pretty standard at triple Phalanx, triple Dux, and 2 Mystletainn. This seems to be my #1 go-to ratio for my Dragunity builds. It's worked with me in the past, it works with me now, I just don't feel the need to change it. As long as I have these type of ratios, the Swarm Dragunity play is always live in this build, which is always fun to initiate against your opponent. And then with the Burning Abyss engine, I run triple Scarm, gotta get those searches as much as possible. Double Seer, and 1 Graph for the special summon plays. For the supporters, I play 2 Farfa to banish the opponent's monster and disrupt some plays, as well as push for game-winning moves. 1 Calcab for the same reason against spells and traps. Alec for the same reason against monster effects. And I decided to, instead of Barbar, to go with 1 Rubric, just because you do play Virgil in this build. It does get very interesting when you combo Virgil's effect with your other BA monsters and your other general level 6 plays, to be able to just wombo combo, and whatever for synchro plays in games. So I figured stat ratio was pretty helpful, and so far it's been working out beautifully for me at this time. For the supporter monsters with the BA side of things, gotta have 1 Tour Guide of the Underworld. Level 3 Fiends Tour Guide is a must for the build, whether it's at 1, 3, 2, whatever. I now also play triple Harpy Harpist, opposed to my last variant where I only played 2 of these. Considering that you have Dante's running around a little bit in this build as well, I figured keeping 3 of these monsters is beneficial early game, just because if you do hit Dante and, say, also mill off a Scarm with the Dante combo, you could potentially +2 search on your end phase, searching for a level 3 Fiend that you'd need next turn, as well as the Dragunity Dux to initiate your combos later. And then for the remainder of the support monsters, I always round it out with Blackwing Zephyros the Elite, and Red Eyes Darkness Malebranche. That is it for the monsters. On to the spells. Considering we don't have the Harpy engine with this anymore, obviously the field presence in this deck is going to cut down drastically, so I've narrowed it down to 2 Dragon Ravines and 1 Terraforming. And from what I've been noticing online, and I've been testing around with this myself, the 2 field card to 1 Terraforming ratio seems to be the standard with most builds out there, and the more I test with this, the more I see why it's kind of standard out there, and it definitely is a really good ratio. And to round up the Dragunity side of things, I also still run the double Dragunity Divine Lance, just because there will be those times where you definitely need to get to that Phalanx one way or the other. Then for the remainder of the spells, we play double Allure of Darkness. Not just the Burning Abyss, but also Zephyros and Dead Red MD Dragon in your hand, acting as additional targets. Allure of Darkness definitely plays a big role in draw power for this build. Double Twin Twisters, because there's tons of discard / graveyard effects to go with this build, as well as setting up plays for the graveyard. And for my last variant, this is the spot where Forbidden Lance used to be, and I'm done with Forbidden Lance with this build. The more and more I played with this in tournaments, the more it ended up dead drawing for me, so I figured instead of just protecting my monsters, why not clear the back row out altogether, as well as plus with the graveyard effects. And of course, I still keep the one Regeki because who doesn't like to clear boards? And then on to the traps, who play the Solemn Brigade and Double Strike and 1 Warning. I wish I could say I have 3 strikes, but I don't, so have the double for now with the Solemn Warning. And I have the 2 standard traps to go for a warning in the past, which is Bombless and Vanities. Pretty standard in my book. That is it for the main deck. On to the extra deck. I still run the 1 Guy Dirge for the Dragunity engine. And for this variant, I'm testing out just 2 Vadriana. Just because you're adding a lot of the rank 3 Burning Abyss with it, your extra deck space does tend to tighten up a lot with this variant. But at the same time, I'm testing other things. I might bump Vadriana back up to 3, but so far it's been testing well. It's 2. I've been able to put down opponents without needing to go into the 3rd the longer the game goes on. And then for the last level 6, the Virgil for the standard Virgil Burning Abyss combo plays. And on to the level 8 monsters, I still run the 1 Stardust Dragon, 1 Psyframe Lord Omega, and 1 Synchro monster that I've been waiting for ages to put in this build, Clear Winged Synchro Dragon. And for those of you that don't know with Dragunity monsters, Dux plus Phalanx equals Vadriana. Vadriana plus the Phalanx you get back from the grave equals one of the easiest access outlets outside of Zolkin to get to Crystal Wind Synchro Dragon, and just to be able to have that easy of an access to this card in this build is phenomenal for what this thing can do. That is it for the Synchro monsters. On to the Exceeds. I run 4 rank 3 monsters. I run 2 Dante Traveler of the Burning Abyss, and shoutouts to Brandon for this second Dante for writing YOLO on here and getting the signature right here, because let's just face it, Dante is the biggest. You only live your life once in this game for what you mill, good or bad. And since we're running tons of rank 3s, I decided to put my 1 copy of Phantom Knight of Breaksword in here, just to have its natural Scrap Dragon effect running around. And another card that I'm debatable on, 1 Super Quantum Mech Grand Beast Grand Pulse, just because even though it's got a really useful effect for nuking back row, this is the card I've been going back and forth for where I want to use this or 3rd Vadriana. Like I said, so far I've kept this card in the build for a reason, just because getting rid of the pesky back row does tend to play into a very big advantage standpoint later on in some games. And then for the rank 6s, still run plenty of Synchro Dragons as well as the Mystletainn, so you still run 1 Heroic King of Atum for the Dragunity combo. And since you just run tons of access to level 6 in general, plus all the Burning Abyss monsters, you have to run the double Beatrice since you run double Dante. And Beatrice is such an imposing force on the field, your opponent is forced to waste resources, play around it if you don't just naturally have Cosmo monsters to beat over the 2800 defense. And it creates problems that opponents do not even want to deal with. And on top of the 2 Beatrice, I also run 1 Dante Pilgrim of the Burning Abyss, because this Fusion monster, just the ability to be brought out to when Beatrice dies, it's just a phenomenal monster. And normally I don't do this in my deck profile videos, but I decided to build a side deck for this build, and I kind of wanted to go over this lightly with you guys just because there are some unique combos that this does present with the build. So for the side deck, I decided to shift my anti-spell fragrances, the 3 copies of it, purely in the side deck. And because we're running tons of Winds and Dark monsters, I'm also keeping 2 Dark Simorgs in the side deck as well. And for those of you that don't know what Dark Simorg does, your opponent cannot set cards period on the field as long as Dark Simorgs face up. Anti-spell fragrance, they have to set the spells first, so these 2 cards on the field, no setting monsters, end spells and traps are completely sealed off. It's a insanely awesome combo. I love launching it whenever possible, especially against those back row heavy decks. For the side deck, I also run the triple Iron Imperial Wall for all the removal decks. 2 Time Space Trap Holes as my main side outs to Pendulum Summoning. 2 Mind Crusts to make people cry for whenever they search. And triple Chain Disappearances because I don't like the idea of getting its plays on the field right off the bat, and I just love adding that add disruption to Monarchs that they don't like dealing with. And with that, that is my B.A.D Burning Abyss Dragunity deck profile. And again, it is a phenomenal build. I suggest you try it for yourself. And as always, comment, rate, and subscribe. Until next time.